So, good morning, everyone. Take your seats. So, welcome to Autopromotec. Welcome to another round of the International Aftermarket Meeting 2025. Today, with a topic which affects the aftermarket, or might affect the aftermarket depending what are the further decisions in Brussels. Cybersecurity versus competition, how independent is the aftermarket in future? My name is Frank Schlehuber. I'm consultant to CLEPA. CLEPA is the European Association for Automotive Suppliers. We are located in Brussels, and I'm leading a couple of working groups related to aftermarket, but also to telematics. And I'm honored to be invited by Autopromotec to be your moderator today and to take you through the program. What is to be expected? After a welcome greeting from Autopromotec and ANFIA, we will have 2 keynotes, and then we go deep into the topic with a group of panelists. So from that side, we will have 90 minutes to dive into the topic of cyber security. And with that, I would like to hand over to Emanuele to give a short welcome from his side.
Okay. Thank you, Frank. My name is Emanuele Vicentini, and I'm in charge for the global promotion of Autopromotec exhibition. So first of all, thank you for all the speakers for bringing here in Bologna their knowledge and their perspective. Exhibitions are an unparalleled exercise of exchange between humans, automotive professionals here. And this creates the miracle of the rebirth, edition after edition, strengthening all the parts that are involved. Companies, brands, industry, professionals, and all the exhibition itself. So we all contribute to co-create the event, Autopromotec in this case. And meanwhile, we can have the opportunity to reinforce each other with the latest news from the sector, but also making network and bringing our enthusiasm. So this is the 30th edition of Autopromotec, which picks new record figures with 1,700 exhibitors from 45 countries, 15 halls filled, top buyers coming from over 40 countries, and more than 100,000 professional visitors expected from 140 countries. Coming to the topic of this year AIM, we really believe that we are living the most challenging times ever. As Autopromotec organizer, we proudly represent the independent automotive aftermarket made by manufacturers and professionals, industry and car repairers. It's an industry that sounds only in Europe at least 500,000 professionals who needs competition, fair rules, and shared knowledge. And this is the main reason we created AIM International Aftermarket Meeting and why it's so important having it during Autopromotec. Our and my special thanks goes to Frank Schlehuber, who accepted our request of developing and coordinating every single stage of this meeting, and to the keynoters and panelists who volunteer to join today and share their experiences, thoughts, and perspective. Thank you.
So, the next welcome from ANFIA, Andrea.
Okay, thank you. Good morning to everybody. My name is Andrea Debernardis. I'm representing ANFIA, that is the Italian National Association of the Automotive Industries. We have more than 520 members, and about 80 of them are part of our aftermarket session and are present here in Autopromotec. We are celebrating this year the 60 years of the exhibition, but also at the same time the 20 years of the presence of the spare parts and component division here in Autopromotec. Secure access to OBD, access to in-vehicle generated data, cybersecurity, renewal of the block exemption regulation are the main challenges that we are discussing for the maintaining the market here with the right competence and the level of concurrence among authorized independent operators. We decided to deliver to you today a workshop dedicated to cybersecurity in order to fully understand the situation, and we have a well-prepared and competent manager as Frank Schlehuber that will moderate the event, and we are in good hands because, as he mentioned, he's in charge of the European dossier. So I would like also to thank Drivesec, that is one of our members, that will deliver a keynote speech presenting you the cybersecurity for the general aspect, and then during the round table we will develop a deep dive on the topic. Thank you for your presence.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Andrea. Indeed, ANFIA is a member also of CLEPA, and what he does on the national side, we translate into what needs to be done on the Brussels side. So, and now it's really time to start with the keynote, and we come now to our first speaker, Martin Frommer. He is Associate Director, Research and Analyst at S&P Global. Martin is an Associate Director in the Research and Analysis Department at S&P. 30 years of experience in the automotive industry, different roles from product manager, analyst, but also a profound knowledge in aftermarket. You are responsible for maintaining and developing forecasting methodologies for vehicles in operation. And this is exactly the topic Martin will talk about in the next quarter of an hour. Martin, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Frank.
So, you get the clicker.
The remote would be nice. Yes. Good morning. My name is Martin Frommer, as Frank already mentioned. I work for a company called S&P Global Mobility, and for those who do not know us, yes, this is the same S&P as in S&P 500. So we are part of Standard & Poor's. We haven't got to do anything with ratings or indices. We purely focus on the automotive and mobility side of things. So, and today I'm going to talk about the vehicles in operation, elsewhere known as the vehicle park, or as we are in Italy, il parco circolante, or for the Germans among us, the Fahrzeugbestand. And yeah, we are going to see a couple of things here. Basically, what's currently on the road, what is going to happen, or what we think is going to happen within the next decade. We're going to have a look at the replacement demand. I'm going to show you why I think this is an important thing to have. We are looking at the composition of the vehicle park by age as well, because of course, as all of you will know, this is relevant to the aftermarket potential in general. Then, of course, one topic that nobody can avoid these days is electrification. Will it all kill us? Will it take us from business potential to zero? The answer is no, of course not, but we'll see. And then we do a quick wrap up to, well, come to some conclusions of that. So without further ado, 1,591,000,000 vehicles globally are on the road, at least the ones that we track and that we for sure know about. This is the current situation at the end of 2024. Why is it 2024? Simply because every statistic relates to the end of the year. So this is an end of the year count for each and every country that we're referring to. We're talking about the 31st of December, year end. So where do they sit? And what are they? Not too much of a surprise. The majority of them are passenger vehicles. So roughly 1.2 billion vehicles are passenger cars. Followed by the light commercial vehicles with, well, 355. million vehicles, and then we've got medium and heavy duty with approximately 70 million. Medium and heavy duty in this case includes buses and coaches, although technically they are not goods vehicles. Important to understand here that the differentiator between light and heavy commercial vehicles is actually the gross vehicle weight. For the majority of markets in the world, and especially here in Europe, it's a limit of 3.5 tons. So if it's 3.5 tons, below it's a light commercial vehicle, above it's a heavy commercial, or a medium duty heavy commercial, as our colleagues like to refer to. So, now where are those vehicles? Basically, you can divide the world into three major regions, which is Asia Pacific, which is the Americas, North, Central, and South, and then there's us, there's Europe. Not much surprise is there that the biggest chunk is in Asia. The majority of cars being in the Greater China region, in mainland China, and in India at the moment. Of course, Asia Pacific at this point includes Australia and New Zealand as well. Then we've got the Americas. There, the biggest chunk actually sits in North America, so US and Canada, Mexico. These are the big ones, followed by Brazil and Argentina further down south. And then there is Europe, right on the heels of that, with approximately same amount of vehicle. What is remarkable, though, is if you look at the map, the vehicle density. Of course, as we know here in Europe, the vehicle density is per capita and per square mile available, much higher than in any of the other regions yet. China might come up with that in the urban areas, but for the time being, we are leading the density there. You've seen the ranking. There is one oddity in the chart that is deliberately there, and that is the Americas. It looks strange if you look at the numbers here for passenger cars. Why are they so low? That's basically because our friends across the pond like to do their daily traveling in, for us, oversized pickup trucks. So actually what is a commercial vehicle is used for personal transport. And then the second one is a statistical one. Everything that is registered or that looks vaguely like an SUV counts as a light commercial vehicle. So not to confuse, if we stack up these numbers, the order of things will align with what is seen in the gray box, but this is just one thing, and I mention it because it's a popular question that comes up. Because if you see that, the number of passenger cars here for Americas, mainly driven by US, is pretty low, and it continues to decline. It declines because this includes the traditional sedan body type, and that is not in favor of the markets. This is just what consumers don't like. This is why these numbers are low, and they continue to go down. So, 1.870 billion is what we expect to be on the road in 10 years' time. As an approximation, of course, a couple of millions give or take. But that's 280 million vehicles on top of what we already have. And that's approximately the size of Western Europe currently. So Western Europe, we know it's crowded already. Where is it going to go? So the answer is obviously, again, Asia Pacific. The majority of growth will come still from China and especially from India, which will see a vast transition from, well, two-wheelers, three-wheelers to proper M1 four-wheeler type vehicles. You see the growth in Europe is still there. So we are still well gaining an 11%. At least that's what we expect. 10% in Americas, but the majority is in Asia Pacific. The reason being basically a catch-up race in motorization, both in Eastern Europe, which is what makes the majority of the growth in Europe, as well as in South and Central America. People are just in a position to afford, and what's more important, and we'll come to that later, to maintain a vehicle, and so this is what they do. So, next one. As we are in Bologna, and as far as I know, this is Italy and this is Europe, and we'll be concentrating on European legal matters afterwards anyway. Let's have a look at the biggest markets in Europe. The key message is the big five are still leading. And I'm not talking about African wildlife here, but about the traditional biggest markets in Europe that we had for literally 2 decades, 3 decades. This is Germany, Italy, UK, France, and Spain. The ranking slightly changes over the years, but in general, these are the markets that are going to be the top 5 in 10 years' time as well. You can see there is a potential change between, or switch in places between Italy and the UK, but that's, well, by a very small margin. Could happen, but it doesn't change anything in terms of general composition of that. The runner-up is Poland, and then there is Turkey, and then there is, for quite a long time, not much to think about. So all of the following markets are considerably smaller than the markets that we see here. Again, I deliberately pointed out one oddity in the chart, and that is this one here. People frequently ask, how come there is more light commercials in France or in the UK when the overall market is so much smaller? Again, that is just a piece of trivia, but the reason is basically one of taxation laws. France and UK especially, favor vehicles that are called vans, but essentially are hatchback vehicles without rear windows and without rear seats. So very small entities like one people or one person companies favor these vehicles. And we haven't got the situation in Germany. So if you run a pizza delivery system, you will probably end up with the same VW Polo or Fiesta, Ford, something. But this vehicle will be registered as a passenger car because there is no additional benefit registering this as a commercial vehicle. So then the question is, how will that all develop? You can see, and again, that is a deliberate gap that I didn't bother to rescale. The thing really is, what you can see from the lower lines here, in general, the transport capacity that we have as of today seems to be sufficient and probably will be sufficient within 10 years' time with the associated growth, of course, but the composition at that point will not change much because that is there. Passenger cars, on the other hand, you will see here, they will still rise because, like I said, in Eastern Europe you will see a higher level of motorization. And then there is something that is related to these vehicles here as well, and this is e-commerce and distribution. Most of us will probably not have thought about e-commerce very much lately because that is an established thing. But if you look at, for example, the distribution centers that Amazon and the likes have, they do not build that in city centers. They build it on the greenfield, and no matter how much automation they will have inside, eventually there's going to be a human being for the time being picking up whatever the delivery of goods is, shoving it into a van and driving off. And there you have the problem that also in Western European locations, the public transport is not available. Means, actually, to get to work, people will have to use a personal car. This is where this growth comes from. So, now we move on to something called new demand, which essentially is the growth of the markets. As you can see here, this is just a comparison between the numbers that we have as of today and the numbers that we expect. The delta here is the growth, so in other words, the new demands. And on the right side here, we have what my colleagues expect to be sold as a new vehicle within the next 10 years. So, and as you can see, for Germany, for example, that means we have a replacement demand of 30 million vehicles. And that means 30 million vehicles that are on the road as of today and that we all think of as business potential because it's unrestricted, will be or might be replaced. And that might mean that more than 50% of the market is restricted now. So we will not have access to the vehicle systems, and that, of course, is a major threat. The situation is not as dire as in other markets, but still you see that there is a lot of change here. So here in the UK, for example, you might ask, why is there such a big new demand? For us, basically, this is post-Brexit recovery. This is making up for what did not happen across the past 8 years. Then another thing is Spain. This is really a market to look out for, where we see a substantial growth. But again, if you look at the replacement demand, that means roughly 9 million of vehicles that you know and that you are able to service today might be at risk for one reason or the other. So another important indicator is the age distribution across the vehicle park. Of course, we know that the majority of vehicles up to 3 years are fully under warranty. So unless they get crushed and need some body repairs, at least the potential is restricted. I'm not saying that it's completely unavailable, and that definitely changed compared to, let's say, some 20 years ago. But in general, this is the proportion that is, well, of limited use for the aftermarket. Then we've got the 4 to 9 years old vehicles, it's 30%, 10 to 19 years, 36%, 35-ish. And what we can see here is that there are already 3% of vehicles that are older than 30 years that are operational. In countries like in Germany, you've got some privilege of a historic number plate, where you can actually take your historic vehicle once it's in a decent shape and older than 30 years, and take it directly into any emissions exclusion zone without catalytic converter, without particulate matter filter. Nobody cares. You have got a historic vehicle, so you could use that. But of course, this is not the 3% that we see here. Part of, or the majority of these vehicles will be vehicles across Western Europe especially, that are just normal vehicles, where the owners don't see any reason why they want to exchange that. If we go to 34, we see that number rises to 10%, and that looks quite a lot at the moment. You will think, hey, how is that? But then again, ask yourself, if you look out onto the street, would you be able to tell straight away the age of a vehicle? For people like me, I'm 55, there are quite a number of vehicles where I say, hey, this is a brand new vehicle, and then I look at the vehicle and I'm like, oh, dang, it's 25 years old. So that is not a dystopia. This is something that really happens already. And so we don't, from a technical perspective, we don't see any reason why that shouldn't change. If we move to Eastern Europe, you can see that this is already a reality as of today. So if people in Poland, Czech Republic, or the Baltics could do that, why shouldn't we be able to? The only reason really is legislation. So emission exclusion zones, of course, hamper that, and if you look at the UK, for example, that has a very heavy effect on the vehicle park composition, because simply people in the London area are no longer able to use their Euro 3 petrol engine or their Euro 4 petrol engine even. And of course then they will have to, if they don't resort to public transport, have to find another means of transport. Yeah, basically what we see here from Eastern Europe is, the only remarkable thing is the 40% here. This is mainly driven by used imports. So countries like Poland, for example, for more than 2 decades had their new demand fed by used imports. So basically there were at least 10 years where the ratio new registrations versus used imports was 1/3 to 2/3. This is going to shrink a little, just because, like I said, people are afford to buy new cars as well, and they potentially will. So, electrification. As of today, in that new age bucket, so into up to 3 years, we've got 14% in Western Europe, and then a meager, well, not even a percent afterwards. Well, yeah, we all know why, because there was not substantial offer available, except for Tesla, who are the most long-running contenders in this field. There was not much else. This thing is going to change in 10 years' time to close to 70%. Again, 70% of that age bucket that I previously ruled out for aftermarket purpose anyway. So again, this is not really something to worry about. The 11% in the second age bucket, again, this is 11% of the 30% that we have shown earlier. Not a big deal, but people have to be prepared. So workshops need to educate themselves. Workshops need to be able to have the proper testing equipment. The positive note really is that although we will not be able to sell exhaust systems, catalytic converters, we will not be able to do engine oil changes, guess what? A vehicle, even with an electric powertrain, does break eventually. They will need bearings, they will need shock absorbers, they will need tires. So that doesn't change just because of the propulsion system design. And that's a positive note, right? So that is nothing to be afraid of, but of course it means an investment in education, and it means an investment into the diagnostic equipment. There's no way arguing around that. So then if we look at Eastern Europe, situation is even less frightening if that is a threat to your business model anyway. We've got 4% in the age group up to 3 years now. We will potentially end up with 30%-ish in 10 years' time. Again, nothing. Of course, it will change slightly the customers within your workshop, but nothing major. It doesn't fundamentally change the way you will work and you will carry out your work in the future. So, the conclusions are basically positive. So all the major markets that we are interested in will continue to grow at a slower pace maybe than we expected some years ago, but they will continue to grow. The transition to battery electric vehicles will continue. They will slightly come in slower than we expected just last summer, but in a situation and in an environment where literally a single government of a single country could change the complete setting from 1 week to the other, we have to be prepared. Then the internal combustion engine, I think that was the major worry that a lot of people had. The internal combustion engine will remain the most common propulsion system. It will be hybridized, but there will still be potential for exhaust systems, for catalytic converters. The diagnostics will still be viable, so this is nothing to worry about. But before I hand over to Gianfranco, the message really is access to the vehicle data and access to the systems that house these vehicle data is crucial. Because if that is not the case, then this is a vast threat to the current business model. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Martin. I think this was a perfect setting the scene, and at the end we had a positive message. The market still is growing. There will be more vehicles in the market than today in 10 years from now. So, and this takes us now more in a direction to our topic, cyber. We have with us today Gianfranco Burzio. He is Automotive Safety and Security Advisor at Drivesec, and he will take us through the secrets of cyber security. And this is very closely related to the electric and electronic architecture of vehicles. And I think it's important to understand the technology behind and why specific things are necessary and are going to happen. Gianfranco started with the Fiat Research Center as an electrical engineer and could gain experience. He worked on ADAS systems. He worked even for associations. You worked on EU-funded projects. And since 2017, you are supporting Drivesec with your gained experience in all these years. So with that, I hand over to you and take us through the nuts and bolts of cyber.
Thank you, Frank. I missed the... okay. Thank you very much. So, good morning. So, my name is Gianfranco Burzio. As Frank has introduced, I have a long experience in the field of automotive field, mainly in the Fiat world. But from 2017, I started my adventure, let me say, with Drivesec. Drivesec is a startup, is an innovative company focused on the cybersecurity. Started from automotive field, but now is also focused on all IoT world. So all embedded system, Internet of Things components are under our, let me say, market. So we have a methodology, we have solution in order to facilitate the introduction on the market of these products. So to fulfill the requirements from the customer, from the client, to fulfill also the regulation, because clearly cybersecurity, all we know that is becoming a very important issue for this telematics world. And so it's important that we protect all the components, all the elements, all the systems from any possible attack. So this is the mission of Drivesec. As I said before, so automotive is becoming more and more complex. So you see some figures about the possible attacks. So you see that all the different aspects from the key, from also for the infotainment, the telematics, the mobile application, and also EV charging system. So where maybe there are money can be really a target for an attack. And the vehicle is also becoming more and more complex. So the possible way to arrive to the vehicle and to make any type of damage is increasing. And so this is becoming an issue for the automotive world overall. So not only the OEMs, mainly the OEMs clearly, but also for the components supplier and also for the aftermarket. So why we need, as I already anticipate, why we need cybersecurity in automotive? We know that we need the cybersecurity on our PC, but why on the vehicle? The reason is that the vehicle is not, let me say, as in 20 years ago, completely isolated. Has a lot of connection with the external world, so telematics communication, vehicle-to-vehicle, vehicle-to-infrastructure communication, external storage, connection with the grid for electric vehicle, and also diagnostics. So all these line, all these connection, either will be wired or more important, wireless, can be used by an attacker in order to enter in the vehicle and make not just damage, but it's also a matter of information, so to get information from the vehicle, or to maybe to get money from the vehicle. You can imagine for the grid connection, you have to pay for the recharging, and so if somebody enter in this communication, can get money from your pocket without any service. Clearly, also diagnostics, also for aftermarket, this is an issue because also this line has to be protected from external attack. Okay, clearly the authority started to consider these aspects and to require from the automotive manufacturer to be protected, to have a protection against threats coming from hacker, from telematics and so on. I listed here just a few of the threats. These are part of the regulation 155. 155 is the uniform provision, so what are the minimum requirements that the OEM have to be fulfilled in terms of cybersecurity and also in terms of cybersecurity management system, because you have to remember that cybersecurity is not one step, only one step. So when you design and produce a vehicle, you have to take care of the cybersecurity. But also during the life of the vehicle, you have to take care of the cybersecurity because there is an evolution of the attacker. So maybe what is secure today, maybe it's not secure tomorrow. So you have also to have a cybersecurity management system that guarantee to have the protection also during the whole life of the vehicle. I listed here some of the threats that are related to the diagnostics. So these are threats listed in the regulation, and these are also the mitigation suggested by the regulation in order to reduce these, the effect, to mitigate the effect of these threats. Clearly, in the cybersecurity is not, let me say, black and white world. So there are threats. You have to consider what are the potential damage of each threat, and if the damage is important or is very easy to produce such a threat, you have to clearly to make action in order to mitigate these possible threats. Okay, OEM clearly changes also the way they produce the vehicle in order to be easy for them to fulfill the requirement in terms of cyber security, to be sure about these threats. And the main point is this, what we see here, the central gateway. So in the vehicle electronics architecture of the vehicle, all the vehicle manufacturers introduce this. That is a way to separate what you see, the word that you see, the line that I showed before, the line outside the vehicle, from the inside of the vehicle, so the powertrain, the body, the safety board. So this board, this is ECU, is an ECU that is not doing nothing in terms of functionality of the vehicle. It's just separate all these communication lines and clearly make also control of the authorization. So if you are authorized, for example, from the OBD to make a diagnosis through the ECU of the vehicle. So this clearly is not an easy way, a way to introduce a protection inside the vehicle, but makes also complicate really the life of the people that would like to connect with this diagnostic port, because clearly to connect to the diagnostic port is just the first step. Then you have to pass through to be authorized from the central gateway to have access to all the ECU. Public authority also consider the right to repair. The right to repair clearly is based on the regulation 5858 and on the article 61.1 say that manufacturer shall provide to independent operator unrestricted, standardized and non-discriminatory access to vehicle OBD information. So, no limitation, standardized, so not clearly. You cannot say, okay, use my tool, use my way. You have to provide also a standard way to get information. And so this become an issue for the OEM in order to provide these access. What is doing typically for authorized repair? For authorized repair, clearly, the OEM produce the tool, produce the software for the tool, and then you can get all the security aspect in order to guarantee the security, the cyber security also of this channel. So they can treat what we say before, this tool as all other component of the vehicle with the same type of protection, authorization, and so on. Cryptation of the data, and so on. But clearly, this cannot be extrapolated to independent repair. What is possible to do with the independent repair is also regulated in the regulation through, they can have a standard tool based on this standard 2534, what is called pass-through. That is a standard interface in order to connect OBD with a tool for diagnosis. On this tool, there is also a standard software, application programming interface standard, and the software from the OEM is still there. But in this case, for independent repair, this is a standard, can be used for all vehicle model, vehicle brand, and so on. What they have just to get is this part of the software from the OEM. We said here about to have access to the vehicle, but clearly in order to make a repair, you need also to have information. You need to have what means if you have error code 2323, what this means, what you have to do, and so you need also information. And the regulation require also make also some requirement on this. They require also what they call standardized navigation, based on the one ISO is 18541. So you see this standard clearly asks to have all these aspects. So you have user authentication, identification of vehicle, selection method for repair and maintenance information, retrieve information packages. So what do you try, for example, wiring diagram, technical service balloting, recall information, and so on. Okay, you OEM, vehicle manufacturer, have to provide this information, but also in this way, not just to require them, but also the way you provide the information. This allows the independent repair clearly to navigate maybe on different websites or the different OEM, but to find always the same, let me say, the same menu, the same information organized in the same way. You see here, for example, from Stellantis, and you cannot read here, but if you can read, this line is exactly what you find here. The first is user authentication and so on. In this way, all independent operators can retrieve the information they need in a standard way. Clearly, there is also the payment aspects that are also covered here. So this part is related to payment, so where you can access the website in order to get the information after you paid for this information. But we have still one point, the human factor. What happens if in this case where we have the independent operator, but the independent operator itself is somebody that is make some problem, so it can get information or can try to, for example, one typical case, if you can program a new key for the vehicle, and then the vehicle that has been previously thefted, you can have also the key of this vehicle. In this case, the regulation requires, okay, how to avoid this for authorized repair is clear. The authorized repair are well known from the OEM. They are making courses. So it's very difficult that an authorized repair will do this type of work. Clearly, OEM cannot control every independent repair. So the public authority introduced the CERMI certification. The CERMI certification for the independent repair is a certification that allows the OEM to say, okay, I can believe on this independent repair because it is certified by this authority. In this case, you have an application on your phone that if you are, so when you would like to have security information from the OEM, you have to pass this step to log in with this Digidentity application, and then you have clearly preliminary being certificated, and then you can, through this QR code, you can access to the security information, for example, for duplication of the vehicle key. Okay, just a few conclusions. So my presentation would like just to be an introduction for the discussion later on, so it would like not make any statement, but clearly just to give you the view that OEMs have a lot of problems in order to offer this open access to the data and to the vehicle, to the repair procedures. Clearly, the main issue is about cybersecurity, but also about intellectual property, because in this way you can also get information from what is on the vehicle. And so this is a problem for vehicle manufacturers, particularly for a small one, because clearly this is an extra effort that they have to do in order to sell their vehicles. But also on the other side, from independent repair, the increasing telematics, the software-defined vehicle are introducing new layers of complexity for the independent repair. So they need more and more this independent access to this right to repair this information. And so this is something that is not completely solved now. We needed to find a balance between the concern about security and financial of the automakers and clearly the growing right to repair demands for both consumers but also independent workshops. And it's clear this balance is still a challenge in order to find in the future. So we need a collaboration between all the stakeholders in the automotive industry, including the public authorities, in order to find the good balance, so to ensure the right to repair will be effectively guaranteed, but without compromising the interest of automakers, independent repair provider, and also consumers. This is the end of my presentation. I don't know if there are questions, if you have time for questions.
Yeah, if there are questions, first of all, thanks a lot for taking us through these difficult topics. Is there any question from the audience? Okay, I hope it will be everything. I think we will discuss anyway this now in the panel. Leave it just here. So with that, we come to the centerpiece and the last part of this meeting today, our panel discussion. Before we go that, let me summarize a little bit what we heard and then make the bridge to what we want to talk about. We all know vehicles are connected and vehicles get more automated functions. And the UN regulation 155, which was mentioned, requires for such vehicles a clear cyber security management system. So, and this covers the entire vehicle, including the diagnostic port, which was in the regulation really seen as a potential location of cyber risks. So from that side, the regulation is clear, requires a cyber management system without being specific of what to do. Yeah? The regulation says nothing about technology, they simply leave it to the OEMs. So now we have the other side. It was also mentioned here, paragraph 61, which grants discrimination-free access to OBD. Yeah, the question is how we do that. The idea is at the moment authorized parties can get access. So, but how to do the authorization and how complicated can you make that? This is the big question for the aftermarket. Fact is that we need to do something. To say, yeah, we are not willing to talk, I think this is not an option. We have, what means unfortunately, the European Court of Justice made it clear. Article 61 has to be respected. So, but now how to find a way to allow a certain control over this port. And this is where the Commission came in and started to develop a delegated act. A delegated act because they cannot change Article 61 without going through the Parliament, but they are empowered to make minor adaptations, and this is what they call a delegated act. And this is exactly what is in discussion since a while. And I'm part of the negotiation teams. Kim is part of the negotiation team. And to be clear, the Commission is about, I would say, 97% done with the proposal. And there is a text available. It was published in March, a first version. Don't trust that version anymore. There were so many iterations. We have a different text at the moment, considering much more. But what's planned is a kind of package deal. On one side, the OEMs get the possibility to restrict the access to the onboard port, but they have to give access to everyone who is authorized. So, and we have found a way how to authorize independent repairers. On the other side, the independent repairers get much more possibilities than they have today. This means today pass through, we heard, this is a super slow connection which does not allow you to be very competitive when you do software updates. So from that side, we said this needs to be part of the package. And in the package, we want to do fast software updates. We want to do parts activation after installation, because in future, parts will not work without activation with credentials from an OEM backend. That's the technology. So, but independent players shall get access here. So, and this is now the balance, what is in discussion at the Commission. And for the last word on that, we expect that by latest end of the summer, the Parliament will make a final decision, not discuss it in detail, that's not needed for a delegated act, but give it a go. And then the Commission delegated act is active. So, and then the thing starts, how to prepare for that. And this is what we want to discuss on the panel. I'm asking on stage our first panelist, Kim Borsting, Head of Vehicle Data Management and Regulatory Affairs at HellaGutmann Group. He is deeply involved in governmental affairs, and he has really a background in organizational psychology and is passionate about enabling organizations to reach their true potential. So he represents the tester, diagnostic tester side in the panel. Then I welcome on stage Kris van der Plas, Head of EU Public Affairs at LKQ Europe. He has spent many years, half of your career with Honda, in the governmental relation topics, and after a short deviation to aviation, you are now back in the automotive world and represent LKQ. Welcome. And then Massimiliano Oliveri del Castillo, Country Sales Manager, Bosch Italy, and he is leading a team which covers, I think, sales of spare parts, but also the workshop equipment, and also running a large workshop organization, the Bosch Car Service Network. Thanks for being with us today. Then our fourth panelist is Alexander Matthey, in his role as Vice President Marketing at Spread. He has had a career with McKinsey in topics growth, marketing, sales work in automotive, and now with Spread. Spread is a young company, or a scale-up, focusing on AI-driven solutions to manage complexity and to speed up processes, also in the aftermarket. They did a lot of work for OEMs, and I thought on the panel it would be helpful also to see what OEMs do at the moment to prepare for that future. And last but not least, Nicola Morzenti, partner at Roland Berger in the Milan office here in Italy, and he advises companies and investors in the automotive and industrial goods industry. Welcome on that panel here today. So, I think we start. We can put a little bit a view on different sides on the market, and you can see it from tester's perspective, you can see it from workshop perspective. Let's start really with go to Gemba into the workshop, and probably Kim, can you give us a little bit an overview on the package deal, how you see that, what's in for workshops, and what will be different for workshops in future?
Yes, absolutely. I would say that if we as tool producers and also the vehicle manufacturers manage to do a good job, then hopefully not much will be different from the user perspective. That is obviously the intention. But obviously in the background, quite a lot will change. And I think the idea of a vehicle as being isolated in a bubble is completely obsolete. And I think that the way to understand that from the workshop perspective is that we will have to recognize that the vehicle also have a digital twin. And this digital twin will obviously have to be taken into account when you do a repair job. So basically, each and every workshop, each tool, and each employee will need to be an active participant in this digital ecosystem from the vehicle manufacturers. So that is obviously extremely important, that the vehicles or the use of the tool gets into this ecosystem, and as soon as he conducts a repair job, he will also have to finalize the repair job in the vehicle's digital twin. So as soon as you're inside this ecosystem, you have the possibility to open the gateway, which was also presented by the Drivesec presentation, but you will also have the ability to actually write and read in the digital twin. And this is something that will change in the future. And what will be the cornerstones for the workshops in that regard and in that process is basically that the tools, they will have to be online more or less constantly, and also the use of the tool will have to authenticate his identity. And that is probably also something that the workshops will need to understand, that as soon as you log into the vehicle, you will also leave a digital trace, and that will be traceable. So we're also not completely anonymous anymore. It is also important to say that even though you have to log in with personal credentials, you will still be pseudonymized. But you will leave this digital trace, and I think that's quite important. Yeah.
Yeah, this is a big change for workshops to understand my tool in future needs to be connected. Otherwise, I can't either get through the gateway or can't do anything behind the gateway. But the promise is you can do more than today.
Exactly. That's obviously the key point here. Today, you cannot complete a task unless you also complete the task in the digital twin. And that is something that comes with the delegated acts, that tool manufacturers will also be allowed to have a role in that environment. So the task we now have is obviously to facilitate this for the workshop in a way that they simply do not notice it.
But I think we also need to be very open with the information. Who knows what? Maybe here also a question. What is known to the OEM? A tool gets connected, a workshop just opens the tool, logs in, connects to a vehicle, then the tester is connected to a back-end server via the toolmaker server. So who knows what at what location? Yeah.
So basically, what is more or less what is always known to the vehicle manufacturers is the tool manufacturer, and from there on, every piece of information is pseudonymized, and only in the case of a security event or a liability event, then that information will be disclosed to the manufacturer. So that's it's still very, very protected.
This means the workshop needs to know that the OEM, where the credential comes from, does nothing, has no information about the workshop, and not about, they only know there is a tool which is registered and which they trust. That's it, yeah?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Good, then probably Massimiliano, could you give us a little bit of a view on what's happening in the Bosch car service network? How do you prepare your workshops in direction to the new age?
Yeah, so for sure it's not only new age, but also present, because security gateway is a reality, in particular in Italy, since some years. So workshop, for sure, must manage this technology transition, cybersecurities. We can also discuss about ADAS, electrification, and for managing this transition, they need a proper diagnostic tool solution and also develop their skill. And we as Bosch are providing a package to the Bosch Car Service Network, to Bosch Networks, and are supporting with training, diagnostic solution, and as well, I would add, to communicate to the car driver that the independent Bosch networks are able to deal with the new technology, because this is another important part of the task, to communicate that independent aftermarket is ready and can deal with the new technologies.
Sure, but how do you manage this registration? You mentioned since years you offer that for the Fiat and some other brands which had the gateways already. In future, this will be much more standard. Do you see any issues with employee registration? And not everyone wants to give his personal ID card and say, oh, that's me working on the car. Maybe a mechanic thinks, oh, I'm only employed in this workshop environment. I'm working not for my own. Why would I give my name? Is that a discussion in workshops?
So I start from the technology point of view. So security gateway, so access and registration is not new. So we are able to give the technology for an easy access. And so, let me say, we are ready for it. And for sure, I would add from the workshop perspective, this access to the different security gateways should be easy in order to be also efficient in the job. This is why we are providing a single sign-in solution. So when you enter in a Bosch diagnostic tool, with the one access, you get all the more than 24 OEM security gateway access. Because otherwise, for a workshop perspective, it's very difficult to deal with different OE portal. And from the user perspective, this is an opportunity for properly communicate that this responsibility that you provide your signature into the car means that you are responsible, and you have to develop your skill. So moreover, you have to know exactly what we are doing on the car. So it can be scared, but on the other way around is an opportunity for setting a higher level for independent aftermarket workshop.
Yeah, the good news is we have in the law at the moment, in the draft, 2 ways of authentication. You can use the CERMI scheme, which you use today already for anti-theft, and you can use proprietary systems offered by a toolmaker like Bosch or Hella or others. So this means this is understood at the side of the legislator, and I hope this will really survive until the final publication in the official journal is done with the text. But at the moment, this is the good news. And we also had a hot discussion about the fact, do we really want to force large workshop organizations? Imagine you are running a glass repair organization, franchise concept all over Europe. I do not want to say names here. But with maybe 5,000 employees, and you have a turnover with employees of 1,500 people a year, entering the organization, leaving the organization. And they all need to be registered and deregistered and so on. This is an administrative burden. We have now a solution found with the legislator which allows that such large franchise companies can do that on behalf of their employees. And in track and trace circumstances, they take the responsibility to go down to the employee level to make sure that you can identify the source of the trouble. So this is, here you get a little bit of feeling how deep this legislation goes in the practical do's and don'ts and daily life of workshop. Therefore, it was really important to understand, and also everyone in the negotiation team learned a lot about, and all input was there very welcome. Kris, from the wholesaler perspective, I think you also have your view on the whole thing, and how do you prepare workshops for the future, your customers? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let me start with a short commercial.
Yeah, sure.
Of course, we sell the garage equipment and the diagnostic tools to the workshops, amongst others those of the colleagues here on the panel. What we also do is we have what we call workshop concepts, which are basically comprehensive support service packages that workshops can sign up to, and they receive a whole panorama of services from us to help them. One of those parts is the remote service. So when they have a car on the bridge and they have a challenge that they can't solve themselves, we can connect remotely to their car and help them to solve that issue. We also have the LKQ Academy, where we have more than 2,200 different trainings for the workshops and their technicians. Some of them are online, some of them are on the workshop floor. We have one, for example, on how to deal with high tension parts, like high voltage batteries for electric vehicles. That one here in Italy is fully certified by the authorities, by the way. So we have a full panorama of services that we have in place to help the workshops. That works very well. We have seen that with the rollout of CERMI across Europe. The workshops really needed a lot of support for that. First of all, by registering to CERMI. It's not easy for a workshop to go through all that red tape, so we help them. And then the first times that they come across a real CERMI repair, they also needed our help to go through that. So we have that in place, and we will use that same system when the new delegated act becomes reality, to help the workshops to have an easy life as possible under that delegated act.
I think that's badly needed, because we had a discussion, will CERMI really be helpful, yes or no? And we should understand the dimension. CERMI was developed only for authentication for anti-theft related repairs. This means you change a component in a car, an immobilizer or a key, and order a new one and connect it to the car. For these things you need an authentication. So, but in future, you need for each and every diagnostic job, and even replacing brake pads on the rear axle, you need a certified tester and an authenticated operator at the end. So this means this is a complete different dimension. And we said it's unrealistic, especially for wholesalers and suppliers, that we put all eggs in one basket called CERMI, and at the end we have no alternative. And therefore CERMI is good, and the tester, diagnostic tester manufacturers will support it, but they also need to offer existing other solutions. And this was so important because the dimension is a different one. Yeah? And to be clear, without being authorized, having an authorized tool, getting credentials, in future nothing works anymore for the independent market. And therefore we have to make things as easy. Good to know and learn that you help workshops really to prepare for that age here. Yeah? Nicola, maybe you see all these developments here from an outside consulting perspective. Technology works in favor of the OEMs, very clear. And what's in future for independent repairers?
Yes, thank you, Frank. It's a very good question. First of all, let's say we are lucky that we are talking about aftermarket, no? So it's a resilient market referring to the car park. So there is time to adapt. So timing is in favor of the transformation. For sure, the technology and even more the legislation is going into the favor of OEM and the official network. The future and the mix as we see is also dependent on the initiative that the single OEMs will take in place. So on one hand, it's clear that the OEMs want to take part more and more of the cake of the value of the aftermarket. On the other hand, they are also struggling with their dealership network, with the licensing, so on the model. So it's not really one direction set. The point that we see is that if we look at the history, no, at least till 3 years ago, there was a constant increase in the mix official independent in favor of the independent. Now, actually, we also see that in the long term there could be challenge. At the same time, the independent aftermarket proved to be more flexible. And let's don't forget that the aftermarket require capillarity, no? So it's not that the OEM will always need the independent aftermarket to get the proper service for the vehicle part. So yes, there is a favorable trend in terms of technology in the long run, but it's also in the interest of the OEMs then finding agreement and then having a balance of the two channels.
Interesting view. I would like to get this really confirmed in practice. Yeah, good. At the moment, we are negotiating with the OEMs, and we have one on the panel here, Alexander, who really completed already a couple of projects with OEMs. And maybe you can tell us a little bit what's the complexity on the side of the OEMs. How could you help them? How do they prepare for the future? Just to calibrate a little bit here, what are their expectations? What are the others, yeah, from the independent side?
Happy to, Frank. Of course, I cannot spell any trade secrets, right? So it's a holistic perspective. But I think one figure that illustrates this quite nicely, right? That also on the OEM side, this is a very much top of mind topic, right? It's like last 5 years alone, it's from a recent analyst report, yeah? We have seen the same warranty cost as in the last 50 years. So 5 years versus 50 years. Yeah? And I think what that nicely shows is what I would call, and as Gianfranco showed based on the architecture, the cost of complexity. Yeah? And complexity is a challenge for everyone in the aftermarket ecosystem, in engineering, in fact, in the entire product life cycle. And I want to touch upon also what Kim shared. Yeah? And the only way we believe, and I think it's similar to the view that Gianfranco presented, is to not only rely on the traditional means, and the OEMs also buy into this, but really look at technology that's out there, enterprise knowledge graphs, digital twins, as Kim mentioned, and really bring it together with understanding the domain, making it practical, not theoretical concepts that sit somewhere in a specialized function, but really bring it to the workshop, bring it to the front line, test it, learn it, apply it, yeah, and bring it to use. And I would say, given that the pain with the warranty cost is already there, of course, this is something OEMs are moving into, thinking about how can they better connect the data, find insight in the data, contextualize it. And this is typically what we help with. And we have the strong conviction, and as Gianfranco shared a little bit on the architecture diagram, that without looking into solutions like this, given that simply how much variance there is in already today's parks and will come now as more vehicles get into the independent aftermarket, will simply not be possible by human means or trial and error. Yeah? If we stay on this approach, it will mean much longer repairs and in fact much longer cost. And then of course it will be much difficult to maintain the business that's there today. So I would say the good news is I think everybody has similar challenges. I think the technology is out there. I think nobody can go it alone. So we believe collaboration is a big asset and an important topic, and yeah, opportunities here to act.
And you sensed also some openness on the OEM side to look for partners, collaboration models, also change a little bit the mindset. We cannot do everything in the own organization.
Yeah, I think many OEMs, or at least a significant number, have ventured into the aftermarket and of course see the profitability and the potential that's there, and have taken a close look, with some being more successful than others maybe, to put it diplomatically. And that in combination with a much greater need of interconnectedness also throughout the product life cycle, simply to offer a competitive customer experience also with new attackers and new manufacturers that come into the market, is simply not possible without stronger collaboration. To give a few examples, protect residual values for EVs, ensure software updates work, having a competitive network, even in a model now going more towards agency, where maybe that network that is only OEM run will not be as dense anymore. So I think everybody recognizes that collaboration or co-opetition, however you want to call it, is a necessity. But I think exactly how that can look like, and also of course in the face of the ongoing regulatory discussion, I think this is now where people look for the right path, the right partners, the right technology.
Okay, yeah, interesting to see that, and you as a smaller company can really observe that maybe better than the existing structures here, because you have no heritage and you see it really with fresh eyes. So now let's take a little bit a different view on the whole thing. We had now the workshop view, but let's now go more in the direction what happens on the production of testers in the future. And Kim, maybe you can elaborate a little bit on what do we have today and what is the future task of a tool maker. I think today we have a lot with reverse engineering. We are you are purchasing, or all of them are purchasing data from OEMs, whatever you can't reverse engineer. There is a certain dependency, but this comes in the future to potentially another level. Yeah? Maybe you can see a little bit, explain a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no doubt that dependencies will be of extreme high level in the future. And it is also correct that historically you could create diagnostic content by analyzing the communication between the vehicle and a client, and then create the content. But that will not be possible in the future, simply because the repair job also needs to be involved with an online element. So here it's safe to say that you need to be, as a tool manufacturer, you need to be a part of this ecosystem. And the delegated act ensures that us as tool producers, we can actually get access not only to the cybersecurity management system, but also to the software update management system, which actually complements the whole thing. So that means that when you're integrated into this environment and you conduct a repair and you finalize the repair with a diagnostic tool, the diagnostic tool will have to obviously do communication with the vehicle, but it will also have to communicate with the vehicle manufacturer's backend. And that has to be done in a very predefined, very precise sequence. First of all, you obviously need to open the gateway. That's just the first step. Secondly, you need to establish contact communication to the actual ECU. That is also protected with security technology. And once that is established, then you will have to execute a set of diagnostic services, which will then eventually end up in a job that has been completed. So it's obvious that there's only one source for that kind of information, and that is the vehicle manufacturers. So we have to purchase that information from the vehicle manufacturers each and every time. So that is something that will create dependencies. And in addition, it's also fair to say that we also completely dependent on the vehicle manufacturer's willingness, but also capability to actually enter into some partnerships that is quite more extensive than what we have known so far. So we will look into a future where we are more dependent on the vehicle manufacturers, and we will also be in a closer cooperation with the vehicle manufacturers. That is absolutely the fact.
Yeah, I think this was a hot discussion and also a learning curve in the last 12 months to understand what is really happening. Yeah, multi-brand tools are part of, in practice, a toolmaker has to enter into a contractual relationship with each and every OEM. So, and this is what changed. Yeah, you need these contracts. You need the being part of their release procedure, and you need to be accepted as element of their cybersecurity management system. So, and they are supervised every 3 years. This means also OEMs have a kind of obligation here to make sure that cybersecurity is ensured. Yeah? But this is a complete new dimension here. What do you think? How long will it take to get really used to that and to implement such a kind of basic contracts and then to enter into a regular flow of information where you as a toolmaker can then provide aftermarket solutions?
Well, we obviously do have some experience because some manufacturers, they jump-started a bit with the secure gateways. So we have seen the consequences already. But what I think is very important to understand is that the extent of integration will reach far beyond just opening the gateway. So there will have to be a much more dynamic interaction between the multi-brand diagnostic tool and the vehicle manufacturer's backend. And that will obviously put quite some stress on us as tool manufacturers, but indeed also put some stress on the vehicle manufacturers, because that will require that they integrate us already at the time of the design of the vehicle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Kris, how do you like the idea that your parts business depends on the availability of such tools where other people decide on investments?
Yeah. If you put it like that. Well, first of all, dependency on the OEMs will only increase. That's a given, that's very clear. What we should be vigilant of is that dependency is not being misused for competitive reasons. Yeah. We did a survey end of last year with our top performing workshops across Europe, and we found that 1/3 of them have regular challenges with accessing the OE server for repair and maintenance information. And these are the best workshops around. Yeah. And 1/3 of them have issues on a regular basis. I can give you 2 examples. We had one car manufacturer who just blatantly refused to give access. Period. Yeah. So we went over to them, we talked to them. At the end we solved it because they were clearly in breach of Article 61 of the type approval regulation. But it took us 8 months before we reached a solution there. So that was a clear breach. Sometimes the issues are much more subtle. We had a workshop asking for an aftermarket NOx sensor. So we shipped it out, they installed it on the car, it malfunctioned. They returned it, we sent the replacement part. We sent the malfunctioning one to the aftermarket parts manufacturer, they test it and it works. The replacement part we sent, they install it on the car, it malfunctions. So what did they do? They went around the corner to the OE dealership, they bought the OE part, they install it and it works. Okay, so bit of an issue for us. So we dug into it. What did we find? Well, the car software was updated, and because of that update, the aftermarket NOx sensor was not compatible anymore. Now, we didn't know that, the workshop didn't know that, the aftermarket parts manufacturer didn't know that. Why? Because it's nowhere mentioned in the RMI. It's nowhere mentioned in any technical information. The car manufacturer knew, because they also had a stock of old OE NOx sensors, yeah? So they developed a tool, a flash box, to flash the chip on the sensor so they could reinstall the software to make it compatible with the car. So they knew. We can buy that flash box from them. Price is €1,000. Yeah? A workshop is not going to spend that money, yeah, for one repair. So the point here is we need market surveillance. We need very good enforcement for all of this. So tomorrow is the deadline for the public consultation of the block exemption regulation.
Correct. Yep.
Yesterday I submitted our response as LKQ. One of the biggest emphasis in that response is enforcement, enforcement, enforcement.
Yeah, I heard this very often. This was also in the discussion with the Commission, market surveillance, and we didn't enforcement. Yeah, we tried to get the wording in dispute settlement. We cannot wait for a 5 years period until somewhere a decision is taken. Yeah, and then at EU level, then deployed back to the member states, and then you wait another 2 years to get a final, like in the Stellantis case. So this is very well understood. I feel that the text in the current draft regarding market surveillance is not as robust as it should be. It's more or less a market surveillance, so, but under which roof and with what power to take, so this is important. And I think that this is still some work to do to get here a strong position in, yeah. Yeah, Nicola, listening to all these explanations here, as a consultant, you should see it from control points, who controls what in the market and what does this have an impact for the different players. Is that something you observe? Where do you see the control points really owned by the OEMs with the potential to really also use that for individual purpose?
Yes, for sure. The OEM has the power to influence, no? And on one hand, there is what we read on the newspaper, at the European Commission, so that there is a postponement. But it's not really as we see 1-0. So yes, you can have some law, but then on a daily life there are some action that the OEMs can do to make favorable agreement with some diagnostic tool manufacturer or with some large workshop. So what we see is that there is a parallel discussion. One is really about pure regulation, could be one-off with this kind of slowing down. Sometimes slowing down also triggered by the OEMs. So this is clearly in favor of the OEMs to have some postponement because the technology is already there and is changing because as we could see before, it's not only one architecture, no? We are now talking about the gateway, that is the access, but in the meantime, we always know that the car maker are adapting different architecture, so this is changing. So to try to answer your question, yes, there are control points, and we expect that the car maker at the end will try to have an agreement with a selected diagnostic tool. Could make some, this could be result in competitive advantage for some, and so they have the power to a little bit influence the competitive landscape, so who could have some advantage. And probably this is also linked to looking at the garage, having some kind of support. Could be support to interpret the data from the server. The cost to access to such a data could be different. So, I mean, within this one on-off, in terms of access to data, there are different power of the OEMs that could change the competition towards some player or not. This is how we see the scenario.
I see. Thanks for that. Insights here. I see really here some control points. You mentioned cost, but we also have server downtimes where you can influence the market. If your server from an OEM is down for 2 weeks, you have in future cut off the entire independent aftermarket. And if at the same time the server for the OEM workshops, the authorized workshops, provides all the credentials needed, that's the issue. And we had these cases in the past. Therefore, I also strongly support we need a kind of surveillance and also a kind of dispute settlement somewhere which acts immediately in case of these cases. Question to Massimiliano, how is the scene on the Bosch side? Do you have examples where it did not work in the past, or how do you deal with this situation, this dependency on OEMs?
So from the tool manufacturer perspective, as Kim said before, we must provide to the workshop more and more OE data, OE RMI, and OE unlock security gateway. This is something that will be needed more and more for being able to repair today into the future. So we show that there is a possibility, the technology behind it to exchange these OE data to bring to the independent aftermarket workshop in a secure way, no? So granting anyhow a connection, secure connection to the OE. And also I would add that due to the fact that we are discussing before on the new architecture of the vehicle, that we as Bosch are one of the first tool manufacturers that bring to the independent aftermarket an OE Tesla diagnostic, showing somehow the way to being able to have the technology to mix diagnostic on also on the new software-defined vehicles. So technology-wise, we can do it. Then there is obviously all the regulation that should, let me say, have an impact and support this technology solution.
Yeah, maybe one final comment from Alexander on the mindset in OEM organizations. What needs to be done on their side? I fear a little bit that with all these new requirements now, they are a little bit overwhelmed with the preparation, because if you need to enter into contracts with each and every toolmaker, and if you need to provide credentials for each and every repair done in a workshop in Europe, you need to have the capacities, the people, the server abilities, and so on. How do you see them preparing for that challenge?
I think maybe to start answering, I mean, it's a big question, right? But I think to start unpack it a little bit, I think the first part is it's an evolution. Yeah? It's an evolution from what is today a more transactional collaboration. I mean, some manufacturers selling the relevant vehicle data, as you know very well, and now really seeing, as Nicola put it, right, really taking an integrated look at the whole value chain. What is in it for them, right? What's really the benefit? And I mean, there are, of course, a bunch of areas that could be explored. What would be possible for quality optimization or cost optimization if I take not only 3 years of vehicles that remain in my own network, but as we saw earlier, a vehicle age up to 15, 20 years or beyond. What could I learn to optimize requirements and further optimize and also get higher profitability? So I think there is value seen, as Nicola put it, in collaboration, but it takes a clear view and I think the right mindset to think entrepreneurial and see what different parties can bring to the table, and then finding the right ways maybe to cut through legal complexity, finding those mutual benefits, and then of course the right technology to make it happen.
Okay, but what is your guess? How long will it take inside an OEM organization to prepare for that new delegated act?
I think the ingredients are all there. I think the biggest driver there besides the delegated act is of course all of the developments we see with geopolitics, so that different regions, different entities have anyways already get to more independence. And so given the ingredients are there, I think technology is not a blocker. It's really finding the right players, the right mindset to really join in together and find attractive ways or mutually attractive ways to collaborate, and taking theoretical potentials, I mean, there's always a lot of talk about AI and what could be possible, but really thinking, and I think we explored it in the first question, right? But from the workshop back, from tangible benefits for mechanics that need to repair a vehicle as fast and as good as possible, that make a difference there. And then it's the question, well, what data can we use? What can everybody bring to the table? and make it practical, create a benefit. And I think when the business case is there, typically, at least over time, players are willing to talk.
Okay, and if it's supported by a legislation, maybe there's even more motivation to talk. So, to sum up here a little bit, maybe one final question to Kim and to Kris. We have talked a lot about the Delegated Act, which is more a technical regulation. It's a part of the type approval regulation, 858, but we have complementing regulation. This is the motor vehicle block exemption regulation, which is under review exactly while we speak. And how do you see the two regulations here? Do we need them both, or do we have a focus on one? What needs to be regulated, and how does this at the end interplay? You want to start, Kim? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, obviously the Delegated Act is concerning the tool's ability to open the gateway and also being able to perform tasks behind the gateway. That is obviously very important, but it is not it's not the full picture. It's extremely important, as also Kris implied, that the suppliers of spare parts are also provided with the information they need to produce compatible spare parts. And here the motor vehicle block exemption is obviously super important, and I think it is of our all's greatest concern that the motor vehicle block exemption is set to expire here in 2028. So I think that's super crucial, that not only that it becomes extended, but also that it becomes indeed strengthened, just to somehow balance out the additional control and leverage that is now on the vehicle manufacturer side.
Kris, how do you see that?
I can only reiterate what Kim has just said. We need both. We need a much stronger, much clearer motor vehicle block exemption. We need, obviously, type approval to be quite specific and clear as well, guaranteeing all the access that the aftermarket needs. The one particularity with both, how they work together, is basically the block exemption regulation has outsourced the enforcement to type approval. Because for the really technical things, they all refer to type approval, yeah? Mm-hmm. Go and see 858. And then you have the type approval authorities who should then do their job, right? But the only tool they have to punish a car manufacturer is to revoke a type approval. They're not going to do that because a car manufacturer is not giving all the technical information, right? So what it ends up with is there is not much enforcement, nor for the block exemption, nor for the type approval. So I come back to my previous point.
Yeah, sure.
That has to improve, and we need to rely also, or we need to clarify that the national competition authorities have a clear role to play on the block exemption and the enforcement there.
It's also clearly the CLEPA position. We need both regulations. We need a strong type approval regulation, and we need an even stronger motor vehicle block exemption regulation. And it's not enough only to extend it beyond May 28. It's also necessary that we revise it, and we need to go into the heart of the regulation, into the hardcore restrictions, and need to find here better wording. Otherwise, there are too many workarounds. With that, we are at the end of our session today. I hope you enjoyed the deep dive into that. There's one question from your side. I just see you.
My name's Kirti. I'm from India. I thank the organizer, Gianfranco, the gentleman out there, and all the 5 speakers. I represent India's IAM sector, ACMA, Automotive Component Manufacturers Association. They have one division, which is the IAM. I represent them. I thank you very much for giving us a chance to hear from all of you wonderful speakers. And I request that we have a session coming up in February 2027. We could do a similar session over here. And last is request all the members over here to exchange cards so that many of you who want to enter India can do something profitably. But last but least, I'd like to thank all the speakers. They've given me a good broad overview of what the IAM is doing in Europe, and I'm sure we can do that because although we have BS6 vehicles in India, by 2028, India will adopt BS7. So I guess it's of equal interest for all of us to collaborate, you know. Thank you very much, sir, for giving me that
thanks
time.
for these kind words at the end. And with that, I have to say thank you to the audience for listening such a long period, and thanks to all the panelists sharing their insights. And with some of them, we are really fighting for a legislation which at the end provides clarity and also a balance of power in the aftermarket. Enjoy the show here at Autopromotec.